Joey Bale. His advisor is Professor Kerry Jackson, and he visited Braunschweig. And next time I'll get the R right. And his majors are mechanical engineering and a minor in German, and he's going to be talking to us about acceptability of subject-verb-object versus object-verb-subject in discourse in L1 English and L2 German, and L1 German and L2 English.
Hello. Right. So hi, I'm Joey. Everything she just said is true. So here's a picture of Braunschweig. I live 15 minutes from here. This is a castle that was just in downtown. I had a great time in Braunschweig. It was a really pretty city. It was like the first year that the English office I worked in with Dr. Holger Hopp, it was his first time in Braunschweig too. So I was kind of getting used to the city with the people I was working with. But Braunschweig is located in northern Germany. It's a train ride away from Potsdam, Berlin. It's very close, and like a 15-minute train ride away from Hanover, which is actually where I lived for the last 3 days of my trip. But I was there from May to July. I met a lot of cool people, met a lot of my friends who were interning and had jobs in Europe, and I ate a lot of good food, and I can't wait to go back. But I'll get into why I was over there. I'll give you a little bit of background on German and as to why my experiment was possible. German has flexible word structures or word formats with sentences because they have case markings. So we have flexible word structures in English too, but we have to be a little bit more indirect about it because we don't have case markings in English. So I have an example up here. If we want to say in English the dog saw a ball in the park, but put the direct object, a ball, in the beginning of the sentence, we can do that, but we have to use a clef, so it was a ball the dog saw in the park is what you'd say. In German, you can literally replace the direct object with the subject, so it would translate to English, the ball the dog sees in the park, which doesn't really make sense in English. But in German, the sentence, the dog saw the ball in the park, is Der Hund sieht den Ball im Park. Der Hund is the subject of the sentence, and den Ball is the direct object. Der means that's the subject, den means it's the direct object, so if you say den Ball sieht der Mann, or den Ball sieht der Hund im Park, it means the exact same thing. It's really easy to distinguish what the sentence means. And Germans do this. It's not very common, but they do it if they want to add emphasis on the direct object of the sentence. So if they wanted to add emphasis on the ball, they'd use this format. So there's been a lot of research done on this phenomenon. Jacques Demidio and Nick Henry did experiments where they saw how people learning German comprehended these sentences when the object is in the beginning of the sentence in German. And what they found was English speakers who are learning German, they get confused when they see an object first sentence. They comprehend it as a subject first sentence, so they would read it as the ball sees a dog in the park, which we know doesn't make sense. But there was another experiment done by Dr. Holger Hopp, who is actually who I worked with over in Braunschweig. He did an experiment where he put these sentences in a context where they would hopefully make more sense, and what he found was when the direct object was the focus of a question, an object first sentence is more acceptable and easily comprehensible. So my experience is a little bit different because I am doing this in both German and English with the clefs in English, and I wanted to look for if L1 German, L2 English, and L1 English, L2 German are sensitive to an alternating discourse when presented with an object first or subject first response to questions. And like I said, I did this in English and German. That was different from the research I did on the other past experiments. So when I was in Braunschweig, I collected 22 useful participants, and and they all have learned English for 13.6 years on average, and their English was really good, I can tell you, just by I got to talk to them in English and German, and their English was, some of them were just as good as mine. But I also did proficiency tests on them with the Lextail task, and you can see I have up here with the English task they averaged around 72.8%, and with the German task they were around 86.5%, which is actually really good. These tasks are really difficult. And yeah, I also have up here they spent an average time of 50.7 months abroad, so they had a lot of experience with English. How my experiment worked was I had two target sentences I presented my participants with, a object or a neutral context, which would just be a question like what happened, and was ist passiert in German, and a direct object focused question being what did the boy buy at this grocery store? So it's drawing focus to what the boy bought at the grocery store, an object focus question. And each of these questions could either receive two different sorts of responses, a subject first response, the boy bought an apple at the grocery store, or an object first response. It was an apple the boy bought at the grocery store. So what I had happen was there was a picture presented on the screen, so it would make these sentences not appear just out of the blue and like confuse the participants. And then they would see the question about the picture, and then they would see a response to that question one word at a time. And I'll give you an example real quick with this context. So they see the picture, it's there for a few seconds, see the question, and then the response. It's a little bit slower, I'm just going to speed through it. So after they get to this point with the 3 question marks, they're then instructed, well they were given instructions, but they hit J or N on the keyboard for ya or nine. And they're like blue stickers and a red sticker for ya or nine. And they hit ya if they think the sentence sounded acceptable, or N if they thought the sentence was unacceptable, and they go to the next question. And what you just saw was an example of a subject, or a neutral discourse, what happened with a subject first response, the boy bought an apple at the grocery store. So what did we get from this experiment? Here's a bar graph of my results. Red is, this experiment was done in both German and English. The red is the German data. The blue is the English data. And on the x-axis, I have this combinations of the response and question type. So you can see I have object, verb, subject, like response, and it was a focus question type. On the y-axis, I have the percent acceptability of the sentences that these participants yielded. So right away, you can see with this graph that subject first responses in any sort of discourse are always accepted, which I mean makes sense. English and German work the same way, that the subject verb object sentence is the most common sentence format. So the data is the same for both German and English. The next big thing that we noticed, which is kind of what the experiment was looking at, was there was a huge difference in the acceptability of object first responses. So when there was a focus question, object first responses were a lot more acceptable than when there was just a neutral question, which if you just think about that, that makes sense too. If I were to ask you what happened, you said it was a ball the dog sees at the park. It just doesn't make sense. And that's what a lot of these Germans thought too. What's interesting though is German is more flexible, but the English data was accepted a little bit more than the German data for these object first responses, but the trends are what we are like mainly looking at, so our data for this at least made a little sense. The next thing that we did was we tracked reaction time, so when they saw the question marks on the screen, how long it took them to press J or N. And you can see that right away, German data is inverse to the acceptability data. And what that means is if a sentence was accepted very often, it was had a low reaction time. And if it was not accepted very often, like this was at 47% in the acceptability data, it took them a lot of time to think about it. So that also makes sense. If they're not sure if the sentence is right or not, they're going to think more about it, be a little bit more confused. And the English data had the same sort of trends, but the graphs were a little bit more flat and like not as distinguished. So yeah, you can see right away that the object first response in a neutral discourse, what I just said, what happened, it was a ball the dog sees at the park, had the longest reaction time, which makes sense because you could probably, the participants were probably tripped up when they saw that combination of sentences. The next big thing that we noticed was that the subject first response to a neutral question had a really long reaction time. So if someone asked you what happened and you said the dog sees a ball in the park, that makes sense. So we really don't have an explanation for that yet because it's kind of weird. We're thinking maybe that the participants were just thinking too much about the context rather than grammar. We really don't know an answer to that question yet, or that data result. So what we can conclude from this data is that these participants, these L1 Germans, L2 English, are actually sensitive to an alternating discourse because you could see by the huge trends in the object focus and object, or just the neutral questions, and their acceptability rate and reaction times. And the next big thing you can notice is that the subjects prefer a subject first response way more than an object first response, no matter what the discourse is. And that's what I have up here. And yeah, it really doesn't matter if it's in German or English. It's the same sort of trends. And right now, I'm collecting data. I'm hoping to get at least 24 participants here at Penn State. I am at like 20 right now. And I'm collecting data, and we're doing the exact same experiment here. Yeah. So I just want to thank Dr. Kerry Jackson, Dr. Holger Heyer, and the entire office I worked at was super cool. I remember thanks it was, this trip wouldn't have been possible.
But it's time for questions, and if people need coffee, this is a good time to come through. John. Oh. Well, okay, John Lipsky, and then I'm not sure, somebody raised their hand here. John.
Yeah, you're doing broad and narrow focus, which is usually also accompanied by changes in the intonational curve. Do you think that had any effect on the, or did you control for it, or do you think it had any effect in the response?
The what kind of curve?
Intonational curve. Your pitch
The
accent.
sound, that if you were to say it, if you were to speak these sentences as opposed to the written format, you would say something like "den Hund."
Yeah.
It was the ball that the dog was.
Yeah. So I mean, this experiment was completely silent, so we didn't compensate for that effect. So yeah, sorry.
So I infer from the word-by-word presentation that this was also an ERP experiment.
Yeah.
No,
RSVP.
No?
RSVP.
Oh,
Rapid Visual
okay.
Serial
Yeah.
Response.
So what was the, so why did you, okay, so what did you hope to get out of a word-by-word presentation that, that you wouldn't get just by showing them the whole sentence at once?
Because we were looking for like reaction times, so we didn't want them like going back and forth like between the words. Like they wanted to just comprehend it all at once and just get like their gut reaction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there time for one more question or not?
You're good.
Joy, so what do you expect to find in the L1 speakers in English?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So yeah, English has a lot less flexible of a word structure. So we're thinking that, and their German's a whole lot worse than my German's English. So we're thinking that they're going to accept object first responses, German or English, way less, especially English, because I mean, when's the last time you said like it was a ball of dog salt apart, or a sentence like that?
In syntactic framing experiment.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe I'll transfer over to German as well. Like they won't accept object
Yeah.
first sentences in German very often
Yeah.
either. So yeah.
Very nice. Oh, is there one more time or it
Have a
will-
question.
We're done.
Okay,
We're
have a
done?
question.
Okay.
Syntactic priming is cool. Did you look at whether the reaction times changed over the course of the experiment? And so the sentences that they were slow to respond at overall, maybe they got faster at. They started accepting the clefting or the object first sentences.
I don't think we
Faster,
have looked at
later.
that
We
yet.
could,
But
though.
yeah, we could. Yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you very much.